when I last week said to tune in again to hear more discussion about inappropriate relations from repressed people, I did not mean for that to be prophetic. I didn't actually want to see that happen, but, here we are.
You willed it into existence.
Very sorry.
We have you to thank for it.
I'm very sorry. I have sinned.
Well, let's start at the beginning, shall we?
Sure. Not that the beginning is very happy either. But I did really, that feels like the wrong thing to say. I did really like the beginning of this episode. I hope you get what I'm meaning.
Yeah, because you're quite pro.
Stop it! Stop right there! Let's not go any further. I really liked it because I felt like it had the right gravitas for, what's happening.
Well, they certainly didn't skip over any of the dramatics following the horrible event of blood and cheese.
No.
And we see all of the chaos that is spreading swiftly throughout the castle.
I really like that. You see the castle from different kind of viewpoints. You see it from, as you say, all of the chaos. And you also see Aegon's absolute rage. And then you also have that scene with Aemon.
Now, I didn't notice if Blood and Cheese were stealing the coins that Aemon and Criston were using when they were sort of planning in the last episode. But we do see Aemon sort of reaching down beneath that table, finding a coin, and it seems like he's putting together that they were where he was very shortly previously, and that they were likely coming for him.
They might have dropped the coin because they were paid half before they went into the Red Keep. So I don't know, but I definitely think that's right. He's kind of walking around realizing he should be the one dead, but I mean, he wouldn't be, come on. But either way, he's probably realizing he was the target, yeah.
Yes, and that it's maybe him that is to blame for what happened, at least.
At least if they happened upon Aemon first, Aemon probably would have ended them, and the outcome wouldn't be what it is.
True. We get to see how the different characters are responding to this trauma and how their emotions are running wild in different ways for different characters. Of course, with Aegon, we see very much anger spilling out.
Yeah, and with Otto, we see he's probably the only one not displaying any emotion. It's absolutely so cold to say we mustn't be shaken by this, and that some good may yet come of it. I mean, that's... Wow.
While also claiming that he is grieving?
I mean, please, just stop it.
Absolutely. He is very much like the voice of reason, I suppose, in this episode.
But also, at the same time, the voice of insanity, because how are you not affected by this any more than he seems to be, which is pretty much not at all.
He lives in the freezer.
That's his home. Alicent is obviously kind of broken. I felt like it was a little bit weird how she just so quickly seemed to have come to the point that the boy's suffering has ended.
Yes.
But she is grieving more for Helaena, which, I mean, it's obviously horrible and she has to live with it, but it feels like, isn't this the same night? How are you already at the point of like, well, at least he's not in pain anymore? I don't know, that felt a bit strange to
Very
me, but
swift.
Alicent is...
Yeah, I always thought it was really strange that it was almost like we would come to terms with Jaehaerys and just ready to focus on Helaena already. This is her grandchild.
It's very strange, and I thought she was supposedly fond of them.
But there is, of course, a lot of emotions, and she may be in denial about certain things, and it's not coming out in a very coherent way, perhaps.
True, and at least we do see emotion from her compared to Otto.
I think it's interesting to see how she seems to blame herself for what happened, that it's because she has sinned that the gods are punishing them, and that's why this happened. She's immediately going that route with her guilt.
I mean, no guilt like religious guilt, right?
She's feeling like the main character.
True. We'll get more into it, but I was very disturbed by her acting like the main character in this tragedy throughout this episode. Again, everything just sounds wrong, but I think the star of this kind of little sequence, the star scene, is definitely Aegon. I have to say, the way he is reacting this episode is very much how I expected Rhaenyra to react in the previous episode, especially because you mentioned when we talked about episode 1 that Rhaenyra had ended season 1 with such like a look of rage, and then all of that is kind of just gone by the time we get to season 2, and that much time isn't supposed to have passed. And here we see very much more what I expected of a parent losing a child. Not that there's no right or wrong way, obviously, but I think it reads as very authentic.
I think it's interesting how it's kind of what we expected Rhaenyra to act like you said, with her look of rage. And then we got Aegon's rage instead over a similar, well, almost exactly the same thing, losing a child to a very violent death. And with how we saw how the audience have responded to Rhaenyra when she lost Lucerys, we saw so much of the whole, ooh, I will support any war crime she's about to commit. And then instead we get Aegon committing atrocities. And it will be interesting to see if people think that is justified in the same way they were ready to come in Rhaenyra's defense.
Of course, he doesn't start with atrocities. He starts by breaking down the Lego set of Viserys, which I think is an interesting choice. I'm kind of here for it. I do kind of like it. Taking out rage that, well, technically doesn't directly relate to Viserys, but Viserys is partly responsible for why all of this is going to hell, and just wanting to punish someone who isn't really there anymore to answer for whatever responsibility they may have for leaving his family in kind of a state of attacking each other.
No, I think you're right. It's an interesting sort of symbolism in it, because Viserys spent so much time with his Lego set and so little time with Aegon. And how Aegon in the last episode sort of portrayed that he wanted to raise his child differently from how Viserys raised him. Also just breaking down Viserys' treasured Lego set. It points to a symbolism of blaming Viserys, maybe, for what has happened.
Aegon is obviously just as angry when we get to the council meeting, which I'm assuming is maybe minutes later.
Yes, his anger and his emotions are very high throughout the entire episode. And he's blaming almost everybody inside of that council meeting.
Well, at first, he is very much certain that this is the work of Rhaenyra, and obviously we saw in the previous episode that they were preparing for the retaliation for the death of Lucerys. So it's not like this came from nowhere. They knew that they might try to attack them, but probably nobody expected an attack in this kind of attack, on a toddler in their beds. He does seem to blame Alicent that this happened, because Alicent showed mercy to Rhaenyra. I think it's interesting that he is speaking in present tense here. Very often something people do when they have just lost someone and your brain hasn't kind of completely fully comprehended that they are gone yet.
It's painful. He is blaming Cole for not protecting his family, and that's something we talked about about the last episode as well, the lack of guards.
Yes, and I am still dumbfounded. We're kind of told in the scene that Cole had given guard duty to someone else, so it's not like he left his post. But how many people was there supposed to be? Only one other person on guard duty? I'm still just so lost on where were all of the guards that were supposed to be there.
Yes, and why does the king only have one king's guard guarding him?
It's mad.
I thought it was very interesting that as soon as Aegon is sort of shifting his blame towards Alicent, that's the precise moment that Larys decides to intervene and basically say, hey, I have found one of the people guilty. Of course, talking about blood. And I think it's a bit of a peculiar placement because it does sort of seem like he has been standing there waiting, and then as soon as Alicent is put in like the hot seat, that's when he's like sort of stopping or like breaking the tension in the room in a way.
Yeah, it's kind of clever. It's like what you would do with a pet or a child when you need to kind of distract them or divert their attention. And Larys obviously knows that Aegon would be very much motivated to go deal with him instead of be at this council meeting. So it's probably calculated for sure. And I think it's interesting also that Aegon is so angry here, and obviously, as he should be, and he is really rash. He's ready to go murder this person. He is ready to just about murder everyone in that room. It seems like he is furious, obviously, and he is breaking things everywhere. And I think it's very interesting that he is still willing to kind of slightly negotiate and slightly listen to a little bit of reason, because obviously Otto is there and he is just stone cold, fresh from the freezer still, but he's also not entirely wrong. Obviously, as we mentioned, emotionally there is something seriously wrong with him, but logically he's not wrong. And I kind of got a little bit of a flashback to the scene of Viserys losing his son, or losing, when he gave the okay for Emma to be cut open. And they have kind of a similar council meeting where they're trying to discuss and figure out what are we going to do, because we do still have a realm to rule. And Viserys shut that down. He just started yelling, obviously, because he was emotional, and he shut it down. And Aegon is absolutely no less emotional, but he is willing to kind of talk things through and negotiate and finish this meeting and come to a solution. Listen to a little bit of reason, perhaps. And I don't know. I don't know if it means anything or if I'm kind of like seeing things that aren't there. But there are similarities, I think. I think we all feel a little bit sick when Otto is kind of thinking that it's such a wonderful, great political idea to parade a little dead child through the city. It's so distasteful, but it's obviously a part of his big master plan to win this war.
It is. It's like a smart move, right? It is a clever thing to do, but emotionally, no one else is there yet. And so it's so jarring, even if it makes sense to do it, even if it's logical. It really stings.
Yeah. And I think that is one of Otto's really big weaknesses, especially in this episode. He's not seeing how much this is hurting Aegon. He is kind of saying he's not required to be at this procession, and I think that is more because he doesn't want Aegon to scare off the small people, and not really to spare Aegon himself, because he doesn't seem to care about it, and he is really not thinking through things here. There are consequences to having feelings, usually. And Otto is just thinking that the Lulu is so Lulu.
We can just suppress it. He does go along with Otto's plan, but it seems almost only because Alicent is also behind it in the way he's grieving. He's so upset. There's so many strong emotions. And it's clear that he's turning to Alicent and asking her for her guidance. And only when she gives it is when he actually goes along with the plan.
Yeah, she does hold a lot of sway with him still, as she is well aware of. So the next we see is that they're doing this carriage ride rather quickly, and we get that scene of Helaena just looking absolutely devastated. Alicent is really trying to make herself the main character in this again, and that's really pissing me off. Helaena is suffering perhaps the greatest loss you can, and Alicent is just telling her, we're going to have to do this little show. Helaena doesn't want to, and it's clear they're just going to have to do it. And then she just swiftly goes into wanting to talk about her little nightly romp that Helaena walked in on. And I'm just like, can you just not? Can you just not put the absolution of yourself onto the shoulders of your daughter?
It makes me wonder because she's asking later as well with Cole if he's told anyone basically what happened while Jaehaerys died, and it almost gives me the vibe that she wants to sort of tell Helaena to not tell anybody what she thought she saw or whatever, and it feels such a selfish thing to do in this moment.
It's very, very selfish. It's annoying me so much because I'm like, how selfish can you be? This is not about you. Oh, okay. Breathe.
She's really unraveling.
It would have been so much better if she could have had this little thing way sooner, like when Viserys was alive, so she could deal with it before this point, because she needs to be there for people and she's just not. Anyways, they do get on that carriage and we see the child.
Unfortunately.
It does have an effect. It does work, as we see.
This carriage scene is so painful to watch, especially as the carriage that is carrying Jaehaerys is getting stuck on the road and they can't get it to move, and the people are like surrounding them and kind of stressing out both Helaena and Alicent even more. And that's also when we see Helaena have her very sad moment. It seems like she's having a panic attack.
One thing I think is interesting during this scene is that she's not perhaps perceiving it that way, but the people truly look like they want to give her love and support, like they feel sorrow for her, because this is obviously a terrible thing that has happened to her, although she is not in a position where she can kind of appreciate it. Obviously not.
It seems to have a profound effect on the small folk, this whole event and doing this funeral so publicly, making sort of a spectacle out of it. And it does seem like the people genuinely are feeling for Helaena and are wanting to support her. But of course, Helaena, like she stated a little bit earlier, she doesn't know them, she doesn't want them closer, she doesn't want any part of this. Something that I kind of noticed in this episode is that we see at least a couple of times where the camera is giving quite a lot of attention to sort of debris floating in the air. We see it both from Helena's perspective and later from Rhaenyra. And I just think it's interesting. I don't quite know what it might symbolize, what it's supposed to mean. But obviously both of these characters have just lost a child and are kind of in a similar position and grieving similar things. And I wonder if they're going to do anything more with that.
I think, what you're talking about here, it's kind of, I don't know if they're tiny little petals or something that they are throwing at Helaena in, I would assume, support. It's not like they're throwing trash on them. So
not rotten vegetables.
It's kind of reminding me of what you do during a wedding procession. So maybe that is something they do during funerals. I don't know. But it is interesting because it's so similar, but also quite different. Also, in this little funeral procession, was that Hugh Hammer's wife? Or am I just seeing things? Because we see her later in the episode. I mean, she looks very similar. And why wouldn't she be here?
Also feels kind of powerful because she has a sick child at home that she is caring for at the moment. So she's probably feeling a lot of their pain as well and probably fear.
So she made a little stop on her way to get that chicken. I think it's a difficult scene, the whole procession. It's very emotional. It's awful. And it feels kind of wrong that they are parading it around and Helaena and Alicent have to sit there where they don't want to be. They just want to have this be a private affair. But at the same time, it is absolutely the most politically savvy thing they can do with the situation they have. So it's very kind of unsavory, but it's still just the truth of politics and war. Then we move on to Rhaenyra being told of what has happened.
And she seems quite shocked.
She also seems very shocked when people around her don't believe that she didn't do this. Which must be kind of not the most pleasant revelation to have.
Yeah, when her whole council seemed to sort of believe that she is indeed behind this, you probably don't feel like people have a lot of faith in you at that point.
Right? I can't even imagine, but if that were me, I would feel so misunderstood. Like, how could anyone believe I would do such a cruel, awful thing? And they're just, like, trying to explain it away, like, you were really sad.
Yeah, and it really does look like, oh, she doesn't believe she could take Aemond, so she's just going for something easy and cruel that will just hurt them as much, all the same.
Absolutely. I think it's interesting that those people around the table don't immediately think this was Daemon, because Daemon more has the reputation of wanting to go himself.
I hate how he's smirking throughout this whole scene.
I hate him. He is just looking like a preening peacock. He is just so proud of how everything went down. I mean, that's the only thing I can see.
That is not the face of a remorseful man whose scheme didn't turn out how he wanted.
No, he is there for the chaos and the pain inflicted and how this is going to tear apart the other side, because it definitely will. We've seen that already.
I think it's interesting that Rhaenys seems to be the first one to clock in that it is Daemon. I mean, it only does take one look from Rhaenyra as well, when she actually looks at him, to put the pieces together.
Because he looks so happy that it's just, who would look that happy if they didn't want this outcome?
I just really wanted the look from Rhaenyra to Daemon and see his smirk to her, because I just, it needs to be in there.
Well, I believe in you. You can find it.
I found it, alright? I found it. And I put it in there. The hammer of justice is coming for House Targaryen.
Isn't that this entire show? I think that's just this show.
Oh. She does have the wits to sort of wait out until after the meeting to be actually confronting him about this.
And what a confrontation that was.
I think it may be one of my favorite scenes.
It's just so very much like the veil is lifted, because I felt like I spent so much of season 1 wondering if Rhaenyra just couldn't see what he was doing and how he was using her. And she is just a lot more aware.
He is denying that he has done this.
I mean, half-heartedly.
Half-heartedly, for sure. And it's just so astoundingly clear that she does not believe him at all.
We do have some of these moments between couples, or not even couples, but relations that seem very honest. Like we have that scene in episode 1 between Rhaenys and Corlys, where Rhaenys is telling Corlys, can you just put away this charade or whatever this falsity, whatever she says. She is just at the point where they've lost so much, let's stop pretending. The pretending isn't going to get us anywhere. And I think this also mirrors a little bit the Alicent and Otto conversation we have in episode 9, I think, in season 1, where Alicent is kind of confronting Otto that they were never playing on the same team, that Otto did use her. Otto just moved her about. Isn't that what she said?
Yeah, about the board or...
Yeah. And this is giving me slightly the same vibes, but so much better than any of those scenes. It's just so intense.
Yeah, the grooming he does in the first season is so bad and is never really being looked into. He's not really getting to hear the depth of how in the wrong he was for that behavior. And I think I was maybe starting to give up that we were gonna get a real confrontation about that. And Rhaenyra just seems to completely have let go of this ideal that he is just this rough man who needs to have the right woman and she can fix him and all of these things. And she's just let all of that go and is really seeing him and what he's done, what sort of part he has played in her life.
And just telling him that I have enough problems, can you please stop being one of them? You know, it's just, I think it's really, really powerful. And they just have such an honest conversation, because he's not really truly being honest, but she is, to the point where he's not managing to deny things. The fact that Daemon says he's a leader. He is kind of admitting that he thought he should be king over Viserys. Viserys was too weak. He's accusing Rhaenyra of being weak as him. And it's just laughable. The fact that he even tells Rhaenyra that Viserys used her like a tool is so rough. It's so awful. Obviously not the worst thing by far he has done this season.
He really is showing all of his magnificent colors, I feel, in this scene. He's really pulling out all of the cards he has with his using fear, having an aggressive outburst, and then trying to like be all touching her, going all near her. And he's using all of these themes that she seems like, not weaknesses perhaps, but things that she may feel insecure about, like her right to be heir, her virtue that he's coming for at one point.
That is so fucked up.
Yeah.
Dude, you're the one who abused her first. I mean, how can you even...
And then calling her weak like her father. He's just insulting her father. He's just throwing everything at her.
It's incredibly manipulative. It's very interesting to see that she has grown. Because obviously when she was a child, she didn't have the capacity or the kind of developed brain to see what he was doing, and he was so much older than her. And I just think it's very rewarding to see that she has grown and reflected over certain things. She's a different person and he's not.
Yes. It really feels like she's become strong enough now. She is stronger than him now, and he can't flap her about anymore. Because he's using all of his tactics to sort of, grab her back and like pull her back into his fold. And she will just not have it. Like, this has been the final straw. And she is just not making any excuses for him anymore.
That is exactly it. And I love how Daemon so pathetically clings to plausible deniability, and Rhaenyra just sees it right through him.
Some queen behavior going on.
But at the same time, it must be so rough because her situation keeps getting more and more desperate and dire and tragic and difficult to be in. And he's supposed to help her and support her and be there for her. And he is just making her life worse.
Yeah, and having to realize what sort of position this has all put her in because of the trust and everything she has put in Daemon, how she's included him in her life. And what it has cost her, it must be so painful to realize for her. On top of everything else that she has just lost.
I don't understand how she is holding it together, but she might be just compartmentalizing for her dear life. It would be very much understandable if she had kind of a breakdown.
Daemon the pathetic prince, everyone.
Boo! Daemon Hate Club, anyone. We're open from 9 to 5, Monday through Friday.
As Daemon is leaving, and we don't really know where he's going, we don't know how long he's going to be gone for, he's dressed in like full armor, which sort of implies that he is off to make some chaos, presumably. I am wondering like where exactly he is headed with Caraxes.
I mean, people kept saying Harrenhal, so I feel like he's not going to go there. I feel like it's the one place he's not going to be, but I don't know.
Just to top it all off, we do also get Daemon completely ignoring his daughter in the hallways. Such a good father figure.
I didn't even notice because he does it so often. I didn't even think about that.
Baela is, of course, on her way to meet with Rhaenyra. I'm quite impressed with how level-headed Rhaenyra is in this scene. Like, Daemon just left the room, and here she's able to have quite balanced conversation with Baela.
Again, I'm telling you, compartmentalization. There's no other explanation. No human can contain all of this and not break down.
I mean, Viserys could never. I am kind of curious about Baela's training, because we do see her with the crossbow out training when Jace is approaching her.
So she must have had some training.
She does seem to be preparing herself, maybe, for the war that is to come.
She is kind of reminding me a little bit about Rhaenys, actually. Because Baela seems fierce, but not so self-interested as Daemon is.
Yeah, they also made it a point to talk about how Daemon showed interest in Baela, but not in Rhaena. And so I suppose it is possible that she got some training from him as well.
I really like this scene between them as they are talking about their fathers, because she is very much obviously talking about Jacaerys' two fathers, the biological one and the presenting to the public one. And Jace has often been so aggressive when people have mentioned that he has two fathers. And here he seems kind of not exactly vulnerable, but he doesn't seem to mind. Like, he seems more open and relaxed, and like it's not an issue for any of them, which I think was really nice to see him just...
Because she's not using it to attack him, right? She's just bonding with him.
And that's really beautiful. Also, the hair game is so up this season. Jace looks far better with this hair than that god-awful wig he had last season, and Bela's hair, same, just same.
Such a glow up.
Yes. And they both look great in this deep red color. Beautiful. Very, very handsome couple. They lived happily ever after.
Oh boy.
We see Alicent taking another bath. Seems to be what she does a lot these days. Again, she is wanting to talk about her sinning with someone. And again, it feels inappropriate to me. And again, like, she's making herself the main character, because Criston is dealing with this as well, but he is not like putting all of his problems on her, but she is trying to do that to him.
This is the point where she is asking Cole directly if he has told anyone, and he basically says, "No, what do you take me for?" or something along those lines. And
which is a little bit weird, because he has tattled before, because he tattled to her, so I don't feel like it's that out of reach to ask him, but okay.
Yes, because she does make a comment about him wanting absolution, perhaps, and then he responds that there is none for what I've done. And we could kind of interpret it in a couple different ways.
But there is one more likely than any other. And I think it becomes clear that he means that nothing can absolve him of the sinning he has done, especially considering they did it during Jaehaerys' murder. And I think what supports this is that we see the return of unhinged Criston. And also, one note I made, because in the previous discussion video we made, we talked about whether this was something that had been going on for a long time, and I'm gonna say probably not, considering that this very unhinged behavior of him seems to have been more of a recent return. Like, he seems to have been kind of keeping somewhat of a check on himself, but maybe he is trying to seek absolution through punishing others.
And maybe also a little bit himself later on.
Is that Eric or Eric? I don't know. It's one of the twins.
Can't we just say one or the other and then be like, oh no, we pronounced it incorrectly if it's the wrong one, and then nobody will know?
Sure.
Let's cut this. Cole is approaching Sir Aerreeks. Aerreek?
Aerreek? Aerreek 1 and Aerreek 2.
Criston is approaching Sir Aerreeks and making him feel bad about his dirty cloak, and I'm not quite sure if it's supposed to be blood on the cloak or if it's just dirt, but I kind of got the vibe that maybe it was from the events that took place the night before, and that it might be like dried up blood. And Cole is talking about how Aerreeks is soiling the honor of the Kingsguard by wearing this cloak, and the cloak is a signal for their purity. And he's truly projecting, because he is obviously feeling that he himself had been soiling his cloak as of late.
Glaringly obvious.
And then they come up with a, what shall we say, not an entirely stupid plan.
Just a little unrefined.
Could do with some tweaks.
But to be fair, I don't think this plan is the worst, because it would have worked if it weren't for Mysaria, and they didn't know she existed, so I feel like it might get a little bit unfair judgment.
Yeah, because it of course went poorly, and it didn't have the desired result. But it could quite easily have. I mean, if he had had another minute, she might have been dead, right?
Mm-hmm.
I do think it's interesting how Cole is sending Aerreeks to sort of...
Aerreeks?
Aerreeks?
Sir Aerreeks? Aerreeks.
Arrakis. Smart plan, but didn't really work out.
No, and talking about Mysaria, one thing I really noticed, she does have these conversations with Rhaenyra, and they're fine. But Mysaria seems to be really upset about losing her house, which I don't begrudge her that. But I think she has been some sort of spy master kind of in that occupation for many, many years, and she seems to know everything about everyone. I think she had the handmaiden Talia that served Alicent, and Talia obviously reported directly what she saw in the Queen's chambers to Mysaria. So Mysaria has had information from the innermost part of the castle, and she's had information about everything. She's the one who found and hid Aegon, yet she cannot figure out who actually burnt her house down. She's just assuming.
She doesn't seem to maybe know just how much of a hand Larys has in everything that goes on in the castle.
Maybe he's just better at it than her. Yeah.
They are really trying to absolve her of her part of putting Aegon on the throne, and also all of this with blood and cheese, I feel, because her information has been vital to both of those instances, and she's very much trying to hammer in that, oh, it was purely transactional, as if that immediately makes it okay, because she wasn't really at that time at a point where she was, from what I gather from her success, that she was in deep poverty and in desperate need of doing those things.
Yeah, but she does say that she sought to be important in some way, so I think she also did it for more than just money. She is very much painting herself as, poor me, I had no choice.
Yeah, with when she's talking to Otto, I think she's demanding that the child pit fighting is to stop, which is of course like an honorable thing to charge for this.
Well, did she want to be in charge of them herself? Also, they talked about that scar. Where's the scar? What happened?
Scar is
I feel like an idiot. What are they talking about? Can anyone enlighten me?
Yeah, I'd like to know as well. What scar is this? Is it supposed to allude that, like, oh, Rhaenyra knows she has a scar and it's like a secret scar, and Mysaria is supposed to be like, ooh, how does she know about my scar? Because it's hidden. And I don't know.
Rhaenyra has become a spy.
Or is it just super obvious and I'm just not seeing it? Eventually, Rhaenyra does release Mysaria, and I think she's being quite clever here and like making sure that she's gonna go on this boat and go far away, so she's not gonna come back and betray Rhaenyra. So that's nice. But then, as she's headed towards the boat, she does kind of decide that she wants to be part of this mess after all, and she is choosing a side here, it seems. Because she could very easily have just boarded that ship and been out of here, no more part to play in this war. And instead, she sees that Aerreeks is arriving, and she is making a clear choice that she's gonna side with Rhaenyra here and help her and maybe see if she can join that side, it seems.
She does choose at this point.
She had a golden ticket out of the conflict.
But she couldn't let go. She just really wants to.
Living for the drama.
I mean, I can respect that. Then we have a brothel scene that went a lot more comfortably than I expected it to. I kind of like this scene, and I think what's clear in this episode is that none of the Greens get kind of the comfort that they need at all from each other or anywhere, but Aemon is the only one finding some semblance of comfort, and it is in this woman's quite literal lap.
Getting some mama's love.
She is very much giving that vibe. He doesn't want to do anything more sexual than just
lie
lay
naked
there
in her lap and get cuddles.
And I really like that there's this kind of parallel of him being vulnerable both in body and also in sharing his emotions, because obviously he has no clothes, he has no armor, he has no weapons, and when we've seen him, he's typically been a fighter and ready to just stir up shit or fight at a moment's notice, and here he is just in a completely different part of himself.
And he's of course dealing with some additional trauma of his own, in the sense that at least from what he's admitting here, that he has regrets about what happened with Lucerys, and clearly he lost control over his dragon when it happened,
And himself.
and himself as well, and he did end up being responsible for Lucerys' death.
And I think it's such a shame that we don't have the scene where he is coming back from that after that happened, because I would have loved to see him be very cocky and pretend like this was intentional and just be very sort of arrogant, and then see that struggle within him. I have a feeling he didn't tell the small council or Alicent or Otto, or especially not Aegon, that, oh, I regret killing Luke, I lost my temper.
Yeah. It does feel like this is the first time that he's sort of admitting it out loud without us really knowing, but it's kind of the vibe that I'm getting.
And she's also trying to instill a bit of morality in him, or thought, very much like a parent would try to guide a child. Like, oh, I get it, you get angry, but just remember that we shouldn't take that out on other people. And he just happens to have the biggest nuke in the realm. So she's trying to kind of like tiptoe around and make him see that maybe he should be more careful in a super gentle way, much more gentle than he obviously deserves.
I think this is an interesting way of showing how things are affecting the small folk, like with the blockade that Rhaenyra has set up. We do see how that is affecting Hugh and his wife and their child, and how like expensive everything has gotten with the prices and everything. We don't really get to see much of how that affects the royals, right? Because they obviously still have food and all their needs met. But I think it's nice that we get some perspectives as well from the lowborn group.
I really like that they have included them, and I think it can be really interesting to see how their struggles eventually spill over to the royals. Obviously, we don't know, but that is very often what happens, that the small folk are not inconsequential. Their living conditions can absolutely directly impact how much fun it is to rule. So I'm very curious to see if we get any of that. I'm very positively surprised that we are getting so much of sort of more ordinary life. I really, really like that.
I think it's really nice because it's easy to brush it off when we don't have any care for any characters in those positions. It would be very easy to only care about the Targaryens and the Velaryons and the Hightowers, while this war is, of course, affecting the small folk the very most. And it's nice
really humanizing them.
Yes.
I like that. We also have that harbor scene of other lowborn people, just in a different setting. I'm not entirely sure what this is, but they are clearly working for / with / in some sort of capacity close to Corlys.
I feel like it's so wholesome, this conversation as well. It's so brotherly and so kind of open.
It feels like a breath of fresh air, really, just these characters, as opposed to King's Landing and the Targaryens, which it just is a little bit exhausting sometimes.
Yeah, where are they? Do you know?
I'm not entirely sure, but that is why I kind of said they are somewhere probably in the vicinity of Corlys, because they are working on the Velaryon fleet. And it seems like we saw Alan, that guy to the right, we saw him in the previous episode talking about mending that ship or something, and there is talk about whether he is going to sail, probably to war with Corlys. And then we are also introduced to the new character Adam, right? We didn't see him in the previous episode, did we?
I don't recognize him, at least.
And he just is immediately likable, I think.
He seems to have a certain charm about him, an easy way of being.
And he just seems kind of like
down to earth, making friends with the wildlife.
Fun and adventurous of spirit, maybe? Because it seems to maybe even possibly attract a dragon.
Can you imagine just being out looking for crabs on the sand and then just have a huge fire reptile nuke soaring above?
Look up and see a dragon, and I don't think there's a rider on that dragon, right?
It doesn't look like it. Does it have a hole in the wing there?
Maybe it's an old dragon then?
Hard to say.
And I don't know if this is a wild dragon or if, because it seems different from the previous scenes where people are very scared when they see a dragon above. We see that scene with Rhaenyra when she is flying on Cyrax and people are just screaming and running away. And we see that scene in King's Landing when Aemon is arriving on Vhagar and people are just aiming a scorpion towards the dragon. Like, people are tense and they are afraid of these dragons. They know the destruction. And here you see Adam and he's just looking at it like it's the best snack ever. Like, he is just excited by a dragon and not terrified.
I'd like to think that's what I would have been like too, if I saw a dragon like that.
I know that could never be me. I'd be terrified.
I would like it to be me.
I mean, maybe they're close to Dragonstone? Aren't there wild dragons there? I'm not sure. I think we need to figure out where they are, so maybe we can locate this dragon.
Pull up Google Maps.
Find my dragon. There's this very short scene between Rhaenys and Corlys, and one thing I just noted about this one is that it's interesting, again, that Rhaenys is kind of saying that she's seeing that Daemon will not, what did she say, be commanded by Rhaenyra. She's seeing this kind of internal struggle, and she's very honest about it. I feel like maybe Corlys isn't taking it as seriously as Rhaenys does, and then...
I mean, story of Corey's life.
But it's interesting to see these moments of more honesty between people in this episode. I don't know. Anything else?
I think it's interesting how they briefly talked about how if Daemon might try to challenge Rhaenyra with his claim. And Rhaenys does shut this down immediately, but it's kind of an interesting remark. She does not seem to believe that he's going to challenge Rhaenyra, but who really knows with Daemon?
The next section I named Aegon made a boo-boo, which is clearly understating the atrocity. But again, as we mentioned, Aegon has done what fans seem to have assumed that Rhaenyra would do after episode 10. He caused a lot of harm to a lot of people, a lot of very permanent harm. And he has obviously hanged the rat catchers because he couldn't be sure which was the guilty. And instead of even just waiting and questioning them or doing anything to try to figure out maybe who is the guilty, he just hangs them all. He seems rather pleased with having hung a guilty man. Less concerned about all the innocent who are hanging there.
He seems to care more about not appearing weak, but instead showing that he is strong and he is not ready to strike down those who oppose him. And so he's just hanging them about like paintings.
It's a little bit similar, but also worse, but also less bloody. But in the first season, Daemon rounds up all the, what does he say, known criminals. It's not like they have very much of a fair trial either. And then he just decapitates and just amputates at will, pretty much. And it's not like there seems to be as much of an issue that, oh my goodness, we're going to lose the small folk. But obviously they are now in a more precarious situation because there is a war. So Otto is obviously furious because this does not look good. But it does remind me of what Daemon did.
That's actually a very interesting catch, because there is a strong parallel there to just taking it into your own hands and just punishing left, right, and center.
He did also want to send a message, and Daemon also wanted to send a message and have a very fun night out on the town.
I do feel like Otto is kind of failing in this instance, because he seems to believe that it was enough to just punish blood after the incident, while he doesn't seem to have any plan in the works for how to catch the rat catcher that is guilty.
Because he doesn't realize how much emotions impact people in general, but also Aegon. He doesn't realize he needs to do something to let Aegon have an outlet for it. So he thinks we can just ignore it, and it's kind of funny because Otto gets really angry. I mean, none of this situation is funny, but that part is kind of funny because he's talking so much about, remaining cool and kind of thinking logical, and now he's just losing it. It doesn't look great on Otto that he's this mad. We haven't really seen him have this much emotion. He has just lost Jaehaerys, which is his great-grandson, in a brutal, violent way. But when he gets really emotional is when he sees that he might lose grasp of the political situation, the upper hand of looking better. Like, that is what is really setting him off the most, which is not cute, Otto. Not cute. And Aegon might not understand that people are coming for his throne. His main priority is not trying to hold on to the power that he has. It's to take revenge at any cost, and that cost has been high. Otto makes a fatal mistake. He invokes the Viserys card. Does not work well on Aegon. I honestly kind of feel like Otto deserves this, can we say, wrinkle in his plan? Because he's never really seen Aegon as a person that he couldn't just control, that he couldn't just roll over. So he has done nothing to prepare him or make him understand what it means to rule and be fair and kind of think things through, not to act when you're all in your emotions. And it just backfires. And I think it's only hilarious in the way that it's affecting Otto. And then he loses his mind and his temper, and that part is kind of funny to me.
It is quite fun to see Otto paying the price for his own shortcomings after he seems like he's putting himself on quite a high horse at times. But I really think that he could have avoided losing his hand, his badge, if he had taken Aegon and Aegon's emotions more seriously and sort of provided an outlet for Aegon's emotions, a way to deal with his grief, with all of this pain. And if he had seen that he needed to do something with the other accomplice, the Ratcatcher, and had sort of a scheme in the working there and not just leaving all of that open for Aegon and Cole to do as they please, I think maybe he would have still been hand at the end of this episode.
Just ignoring Aegon's feelings like that means that Aegon feels like, I'm going to have to deal with this myself. He didn't even have to find the Ratcatcher, at least not at the beginning, but just validating that you're right, this is awful, we're gonna kill them all, as Catelyn Stark says, you know. If he just kind of gave him a little bit of validation that this will be avenged, I think Aegon might have felt like they were more on a team, but now he is just seeing Otto as kind of a little bit of a wet sock.
Yeah, I think that might be a bit of a running theme for them, that instead of regulating their feelings, they only ever try to suppress them, and then it just all blows up.
Yup.
They all need therapy. I'm not sure any of us think that Criston Cole should be the new hand, but if it is a fist of steel that Aegon wants as his hand, then that is, probably exactly what he's gonna get in our dear Criston Cole.
I think even judging by our dear Criston Cole's facial expression, I don't even think he necessarily thought he should be hand.
He looked shocked.
Yeah.
And so did Otto.
So did Otto.
Another thing to mention that I thought was kind of peculiar is how Aegon seems to have internalized that Viserys did want him to be his heir. Maybe after the chat he had with Alicent in the wagon with the knife and stuff in episode 9, season 1. Because he seems shocked when Otto is sort of implying that that was not the case.
Because Otto very much is speaking to Aegon very differently than he did Viserys. Obviously, I don't see Otto calling Aegon your grace much. It's just Aegon and my stupid grandchild or something. So I don't think he expects Aegon to really fire him.
I think it's also kind of fun that he chooses Criston Cole as his new hand instead of Larys, who seemed like he might have made a bit of a play for that position himself.
He's going to be so angry. I can't wait to see that face. I kind of derailed us a little bit, but Otto does kind of, what does he say? You really think so? Or something, when Aegon is telling him that Viserys did want him to be king. And I thought that was interesting because I got the impression that Otto believed Alicent when she said that Viserys wished for Aegon to be king, but clearly maybe he doesn't even believe her. Maybe he thinks she's just lying to make herself feel better or something.
I mean, Viserys was in a terrible shape that night, and Otto knows really well.
It wasn't the first night he was in a
works.
terrible shape.
So maybe he thought he was spewing nonsense. I don't know. But I don't think he believes either that Viserys really wanted Aegon to be king. It just sort of worked for their own scheme. And he has shown that he's very good at using any advantage that he can find.
But it seems like his fatal mistake is going to be that pretending feelings don't exist and can be ignored. It's going to be his downfall.
Towards the end of the episode, we see, of course, Cole's plan with Aerreeks is being cooked up as he is arriving on Dragonstone.
The Sirs Aerreeks are going to fight.
Aerreeks 1 and 2. Who is the better Aerreek? Not sure anyone really believes that Rhaenyra was going to be taken down by this scheme. But the scheme is not a terrible one, and they do get surprisingly close. There seems to be more planning involved in it than I initially thought. We see Aerreeks going to sort of lock the escape door at the other side of the room, and then seems to have some lines prepared for how to become the guard watching over the door to remove another white cloak.
It seems like it's slightly better planned than the ending of previous episode, the Blood and Cheese event, but obviously the Aerreeks are not successful, or Aerreek is not successful, but then Blood and Cheese is just pretty much planned as poorly as it could be, and they still end up kind of succeeding with the most striking blow they possibly could. It's a little bit decided to improve the plausibility aspect just a touch.
Yeah, I do think that worked. There's, to me, maybe it just didn't feel like the stakes were high enough. I never thought that Rhaenyra was seriously in danger here.
No. I was more afraid for her kind of like earlier in the episode.
It is, of course, a very tragic event to have two twins who were so close initially to end up murdering each other and themselves.
Especially because this started out as a rather perhaps dishonorable task in an attempt to relieve some of Criston's guilt around another dishonorable, shall we say, act. So that is adding to the tragedy of it, I think.
I do wonder how much people in general will care about this, because that seems maybe cold, but these characters, to me, have been very difficult to separate, and their names are so similar. I think a lot of people won't really know who is who, even, and obviously we can't tell them apart because they're so similar, and maybe they're just not that interesting compared to the magical people with the dragons.
I wonder how Rhaenyra will react to it, though, seeing as they try to send an assassin after her for something that she feels like she didn't do.
I do think she is smart enough to realize why they think it's her, considering she realized that Daemon was behind it. Yeah,
I am sure.
But she's had a rough time. Are we ready for the last scene?
I think we're ready for the last absolute mess. It's very messy. The Greens are very, very messy.
I got really frustrated watching this last scene.
So much of it feels kind of unnecessary.
Yeah, and with all of the repressed feelings as well.
Mm-hmm.
Otto is obviously feeling a lot. Alicent is feeling a lot. And they sort of just decide that Otto is going to leave and then maybe come back later once Aegon is cooling down.
Otto is obviously very annoyed with his grandchild. He has not calmed down yet, which is funny because he was so calm just hours after Jaehaerys' death. And we kind of see the continuation of Otto and Alicent trying to work together to hold on to the power they once had that is now kind of bestowed on Aegon. And seeing how they try to lay these plans for what they're gonna do, send
Just
Otto
continue
away,
to
and then
scheme.
right, their plans are just not always going the way they want.
It's quite fascinating because they are, of course, very savvy compared to Aegon, and they have a lot of experience navigating the political climate and caring for the small folk and the the kingdoms. But they don't understand this very important part of steering this ship, and therefore they have been sacked. And I do think that Aegon's ship is perhaps poorer for it.
It seems like for all their scheming and all their trying, they're becoming more and more irrelevant to Aegon.
I'm very excited to see how it's gonna go. We also get the mention of Alicent's third son, Daeron, who is currently in Old Town. This is a character that they have not at all mentioned by name in the first season at all or until this very point. And I think for the non-readers, this probably came as maybe confusing, definitely a surprise, I would imagine, bringing yet another player into the fold.
Yes, Alicent has a surprise son. I wonder what he looks like. I wonder if he has the fourth dragon they talked about in episode 10 of season 1.
I mean, who else could it be?
I thought it was Alicent. I thought she had a dragon and she was just not really talking about it.
Oh yeah, that would have made perfect sense. She is, of course, a famous dragon lover.
I wonder if we're going to see Daeron or just hear about him. I'm not sure.
I would be surprised if he doesn't show up.
Really? I'm not sure. Maybe. I mean, in this season.
They seem to be needing all the help they can get, both sides. But yeah, maybe not this season. I want to see some new dragons, though. We have yet to be seeing a new one this season.
What about the one who showed himself to Adam?
I suppose that might be a new one, but we didn't really get enough close.
I can see where Alicent gets her main character syndrome from when we see Otto. He's doing the exact same thing.
Yup. The repress express.
He is in his feelings, big time. And he is kind of venting to Alicent. And when Alicent needs to vent back or kind of try to absolve herself, just talk to someone, trying to get that sinning off her chest, he wants none of it. He is not here for that at all.
He's kind of pulling a Viserys on her. Doesn't want to talk about it. Doesn't want to hear it.
Of all the people who should talk to her about it, he is the one, I think.
Yeah.
He should be there for his child that he has thrust into this horrible situation.
Otto is kind of the only player on the field that is firmly behind her, on her side, who doesn't want to see her feet or her cat. And therefore, I can completely understand that she is very, very angry with him. And she is storming out and right into continuing the cycle, I suppose.
Yes, 100%. Because Otto is not there for Alicent, and Alicent storms out, sees Aegon, and then she is not there for him, and I feel so betrayed by her just not supporting Aegon in this moment. Aegon really needs someone, and just because she needs someone, it doesn't mean that she can just like, oh, this is so incredibly frustrating to watch. Especially because she just talked about how much she wants to kind of try to make him listen and get him over on Alicent and Otto's side. She's scheming with Otto to get control of Aegon, and she has this prime moment of him being vulnerable. She could be there and support him and get him even more on her side, and she's just turning around because she wants someone to be there for her, and oh, it's so frustrating.
I think maybe if I'm gonna try to see it a little bit from Alicent's side here to sort of make sense of it, I might speculate that she is very angry with Aegon right now and therefore not in a place where she's able to be there for him when he's upset. Possibly because she is losing her father Otto again for the second time, as he has been sacked from this job before, and therefore she doesn't have the capacity to be there for him. But yeah, I completely agree with you that it feels like such a letdown, as this is her son and he's just lost his child. He's grieving, and in all ways she should be there for him, even if it was just because she wanted to manipulate him into behaving.
Exactly. Even if the intentions were not the best, she should. Oh, I'm so angry with her for this.
Yeah, it really seems like she has so many frustrations built up inside of her. There is no one she can talk to about any of it, and she's angry and she's losing control. She's losing influence left, right, and center, becoming less and less important, having less and less power. And
Sinning.
Then we, of course, yeah, she's sinning. She feels like she's losing control over herself. And
I think for me, it's just the fact that she can't see that other people have bigger problems than her. I understand that she is falling apart, but both Aegon and Helena are now mourning losses that are much greater than hers. They have suffered things that she has not, and that is the thing that is really bothering me, that she can't step outside of herself to be there for them. She can kind of step away from her problems and scheme with Otto, but she can't like take a break from her own problems and be there for her children. I think that is what's really bothering me. And then Aegon doesn't have anything to comfort him, and you see that he is also not there for Helena when she is walking up the stairs earlier in the episode. Aegon and Helena share that look and he just walks on. Like, nobody is there for anybody else, and people, like, all of these people just need someone to be there for them. If they could all just take turns, it would work out so much better. But, like, They're all in their own issues.
They're just lacking the capability to support anyone else. It seems that they don't possess the skill. And it's so frustrating to watch because you just see all of these characters hurting so immensely and needing someone to be there for them, and then they're all hurting and they're all failing each other simultaneously, making it worse. The only one who seems to actually be getting some sort of support in this episode is Aemond.
And I assume that he is paying for that privilege. It looked like a very fancy establishment. Like, that brothel looked definitely like the nicest one we have seen so far. Nothing like the ones Daemon visited. Anyways, that is completely beside the point. Sorry to bring up that. But we do see Alicent take out her frustrations. It feels like a continuation of this.
Yeah, it does. And it just continues to be really uncomfortable. Alicent seems to have lost control over herself in the last episode. I don't know if Criston Cole was supposed to be here in the room when she came back, but she really seems to be taking some frustrations out on him as she is beating him again and again, pushing him, shoving him. The domestic abuse
is abusing.
It is. It's very painful to watch, and also with sort of the background of Cole having been through a lot and feeling very dirty and like he has sinned a lot himself. I don't know if he sees this as a part of his absolution, some way to sort of make up for what he has done. And maybe he feels like this is the only way he can be there for Alicent, by being her punching bag first and then later her bed pillow, or whatever we shall call it. But it is so toxic.
It's really not great.
Yeah, I'm not sure if he feels like he is trying to carry this for Alicent because she doesn't have an outlet and she clearly needs one. Or if he feels like he deserves it. If he feels like he has it coming. If this is a way to repay Alicent for how she helped him when he was really low. He is clearly a very loyal character.
It's very difficult to kind of fully understand the situation. We've seen just small brackets of it. What is clear is that they are both really struggling with what is going on. And it's the first time we've seen the beginning of it, not just the end or the sort of middle of it, which has been super weird and awkward. And this is very, very strange. Everything about this feels so unhealthy. And I think that's such a shame, because they seem like people who had a much more supportive kind of relationship. And I don't mean romantic even, just they seem to be there for each other and be a positive influence in each other's lives. And now it just seems so toxic and like they are very self-destructive. It's just spiraling downwards really quickly.
Yeah, I wonder if her anger also could have something to do with how Criston Cole is the new hand. He sort of took the place of her father, and he was, of course, responsible for sending Aerreeks to Dragonstone. I don't know how much information Alicent has on this yet, but she could maybe be also upset about his role in helping Aegon sort of tread out of their control. And maybe that is also adding to the punishment she is
doling out,
putting on him.
And then it starts with this frustration and anger, and then it leads to something sexual. And I feel like we need more information, but I also really don't want to know anything more about this. But I feel like I don't have enough information to make sense of it.
I don't love how they've handled the storytelling of their relationship.
But I'm open for it making sense later on, if that makes sense.
Yes, yeah. I agree. There is things I can grasp at to sort of try to understand the situation, but I just feel like I need more information.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And this being like the first time we see the start of their bedside tango, I hope it doesn't always start that way. And I really hope we don't have to end every single episode with these two naked in a bed.
Or against the wall.
Or on a chair.
I share your sentiment on that. But how it starts, there is no wonder that the endings are so incredibly awkward and tense and weird and messed up. Because everything else looks kind of messed up too.
Do you have a rating for this week's episode?
I thought it was better than last week's. Or if not better, I felt like these two episodes belong, like they make a better story together. So I feel a little bit more complete after seeing this one.
Yeah, I kind of feel better about the last
watching
episode
this
because of how...
I agree.
Yeah, I think they did a good job. See you next week for an episode
without
with
any
absolutely zero.
No inappropriate sex, nothing, none of that. We're gonna have no sexual scenes next episode. Please.